Okay, we're rolling.
Thank you. Welcome to 15 to 15 once again. Today our topic is what is spiritual practice? Now, when I was going to school at Oakland, and I would meet new people, they would never ask, what church do you belong to, or what do you believe, or what's your religion? They would say, typical California, what's your spiritual practice? And that was referring probably to yoga, different kind of Buddhist meditations. They were used to a kind of discipline of spiritual practice. So I had to think about this, and eventually when I wrote my dissertation called Abolition and Remembrance, the subtitle is Spiritual Practice and Current Nuclear Weapons Issues in North Dakota. So I had to think about what do I mean by spiritual practice? And I'm going to give some elements of spiritual practice that you might find interesting, and also share, I would say, the basic 5 spiritual practices of my life. So, spiritual practice, what is it? And I won't define it so much as give some elements of it. Let's say that one of the spiritual practices that I do is crane folding.
Do we have a crane?
There's a crane over there.
This is with an Inca drawing on
Why
it.
don't you bring that? Is that an Inca on there?
Probably an Inca
Why don't
drawing.
you set it here, some nice place. So what's one of the practices? Now, there are 6 elements to spiritual practices. These are my own development, but they're also. 1, as opposed to when people ask you, what do you believe in? It's something you do. It's an action, like folding the crane with a certain attitude. It's something you repeat, you do over and over. You don't just do it once and it's a spiritual practice. It's something you may do, it's something you choose. No one can force you to do a spiritual practice. They may recommend it, but it's not something that you have the power. Every person who does spiritual practice in Bismarck is something they choose.
Yeah.
There's a certain attitude you have toward it. This is the hardest to define, of course, but I'd say it's kind of an openness to some ultimate value. Some people might call that God or high value, but it's not simply something you do every day, which is nice and entertaining, but there's some kind of an attitude of high value. The person who does it gets some kind of benefit from it. It might be something like reduction of stress or relaxation.
Is that normal?
There's a cat fight going on here. But the person gets some kind of benefit, like maybe a connection to the world or reduction of stress or something like that. And because it's a practice, it involves a certain amount of skill, meaning that you can improve your ability to do it. That's why they talk about yoga and meditation, the spiritual practice. Now, one example of spiritual practice that would be going on in our community is there are many Catholics in this town, in the Bismarck and Mandan, who do the rosary. That is, there's this.
I know it.
It's
It's a
what
rosary.
it is, and they do it, and they're doing it. They do it. It's not. You don't know.
You just count it with your finger, right? Like this.
I think that would probably, but notice it has an order to it.
Yeah.
And we could even talk about how they do it, what they think, what benefits they get from it, all these kind. But it is a practice.
It isn't for just like keeping track of how many Hail Marys you got to do.
Well, that would be part of it. And some of them, they would say when they say, well, sometimes I fall asleep or I get bored, and they ask their priest or somebody, how can I do it better?
Okay.
So anyhow,
cool.
It would be an example of a practice. Now,
do you have a rosary?
no, I don't care for rosaries.
Why?
I find it repulsive.
Why?
We will discuss that later. Well, let me go through that. Now, you see
I want a rosary.
do, repeat, choose, open to some kind of high value, benefit, and skill.
You got 10 minutes.
Where's my little sheet? I thought I had another sheet here. Okay, now I'm going to make a list of what I consider my basic spiritual practices, as opposed to just other wonderful things that I do. Anyhow, 1, I would say I participate in Quaker meeting for worship. We will do that tomorrow morning. It is something I do. I repeat it. I've done it every week. I do it for maybe 30 some years. I have some skills in this. I choose to do it. I have a certain attitude. I do it, and I get some benefits. Now we do it in a certain way. It doesn't tell you what I believe about anything. That's why the reason I'm so passionate about this, people keep saying, well, what do you believe? Let me tell you what I do, and then you can kind of extrapolate what you think I might believe from whatever that is.
That's good.
Number two, so belief is different than this. Number two, I'm a crane folder, and I do that as a discipline, and sometimes they're better than others, and I'm doing
This
it
one
within...
looks like Inca did it, maybe.
Maybe. Yes, okay. And I do it within the context of nuclear weapons.
You do know how to do that double fold.
Yeah.
I don't know that double fold move.
Well,
You'll have to teach me
I'll
that.
have to teach you that. Okay, but I'm doing it within the context of nuclear weapons, not just as a good luck charm or something like that, a prayer for health and all this. Number three, I'm a sacred reader. Meaning I'm a literary person and I read quite a bit, books, novels, poetry, but there's another kind of reading that I would say, like when I read the Bible or the Lotus Sutras or the Greek, the Hindu things, it's a different kind of reading. And so I'm going to use the Latin word Lectio Divina, meaning sacred reading, which is a Catholic kind of term but I apply. Number four, I am a cage concert person, which means I do this quite often. I will sit and listen to sounds, and I'm doing it for whatever reasons, but I do it and I see it as not just, I think I'll go on and listen. It's something bigger than that. And number five, oh God, I can't forget. Five. Oh yes, the most important one. Several years ago, and this has to do with why we're in this room, Linda Pearson was in this room and she said, she said to Bonnie and me, you make altar spaces. And I had never really noticed that before, but I notice it now, that you'll notice in this house, there are various things that are,
Yes.
There it is. There is one of them. It is not just decor in the normal sense of the word, and we don't think about it. It's not like we plan it.
Yeah.
It's just the junk that the things that emerge, and then we shape them into something that is not just pretty, but has, as it would call it, it's an altar space. Now, one thing that happened with this one, it's been up here for several years. Bonnie put that up, put those rocks.
I got those rocks from the backyard.
Oh, okay, well, good. And it looks nice. And about a week ago, for the first time ever, I know we've lived with this card for a long time, and we never sent it anywhere because it's so pretty. I kind of like the idea of keeping it around. And
That's the same card?
It's the same card, and it's such a nice one. And it was part of the junk that was here. And for the first time, I actually consciously picked it up and put it over here. And it caught the morning sun. It was just brilliantly beautiful. And that was the first time that I intentionally did something for the altar space that was kind of, what's its purpose? It's beauty, but it's not just prettiness, it's something more like Bronnie and I are creating. We just naturally do it. Come with me and we'll see another one. How much time? 3 minutes?
6 minutes.
Now this one just emerged. I don't know how. But somebody put those Buddhas up there.
You got a lot of Buddhas.
There's a dog also.
I like that dog.
And I think this is a Hindu Ganesh. And I think I picked up that clay thing for some students who had been doing
We're gonna
if
throw
they
away stuff.
throw away, and we allowed to take them. So I took it, and it was in the junk pile.
Yes.
Somebody, probably Bonnie, just put them up. She wasn't thinking deep thoughts or anything.
Yeah.
She simply put them up, but you can see there's a beauty and aesthetic to that, and it's what Linda would call an altar space. They're not just decor.
Right.
Let's look at the last one. There was one downstairs in MLT. But it's
Oh, my
totally
goodness.
Demolished by books and things like that. The
Okay.
last one I would like to focus on is this one here. This table gets junkified very often, but somewhere along the line, just in the last few months, this nice thing came. I think Sarah brought it, and we started putting things in it, and I'll show you one other thing about this. But I can see that now this space is becoming more than just house decor. Like if a person said, well, I think we need a lamp here, or maybe you'll get a picture,
Right.
something like that. They are what she called altars. It's something we do even though we weren't conscious that we were doing it. We do it quite often. We just naturally, you can see that's emerging as one.
Yeah.
And it includes your Finnegan's Wake, the book Finnegan's Wake, other objects, things like that. It's something we choose to do. There's something about these altar spaces that are more, they're like beauty, but there's kind of a statement. I noticed they tend to use sacred symbols that we kind of, all of us, those Buddhas, there's a reason we're using it. Now, for a while I had this up there, but the color didn't quite work to me. And so I put it over here. Now this was a gift from Catherine Hengen, I think for my birthday. And she put this beautiful blue thing. And I think I had made this as a kind of something similar to a rosary.
This is
But
nice.
it's pretty, and it's based on blue, which is the important color for me because of all sorts of reasons. And I created that. And I think Catherine must have put some words in here. Whatever this is. Oh yeah, she has a text in, some Buddhist text in here. Chinese Happy Buddha of Futai. So this object, my friend has given me this.
3 minutes.
Good. Oh, that's good. And I'm going to put this, and then I put that in there, even though the color isn't, but it's only now that I'm becoming aware that I know we do this, I've been listing altar space for some time, and yet I've never been conscious of doing it or saying, I think I'm going to put that card over there, and then and maybe spend time looking at the object. It is obviously meant to be beautiful, harmonious, but it symbolizes something, and that has something to do with this. And so when I do presentations on this, and I have, because I think it's very useful, people keep thinking, well, what's my spiritual practice? And I say, well, one of my consultations is, don't automatically think about what's my spiritual practice. Just describe what you do in the course of a day or in a week. And are there certain events, like if you're in the mindfulness thing, washing dishes can be a spiritual practice. Or some people say, well, I walk my dog every day and it's very beautiful. Is that a spiritual practice? I said, well, rather than just describe everything you do in the course of a day and a week and all the events of life, and then if you want to spend some time seeing whether there are some that you repeat like this, then maybe you might want to refer to it as a spiritual practice. But it'll be fun in the future to discuss these 5 with you and how I do those things. What is the formality of how I do those things? So in conclusion, it's what you do it, you repeat it, you choose it, you're open to something, benefit and skill, and it's a way of countering the question, well, what do you believe in? He says, let me tell you let's find out what you do, and then if you can express some kind of belief about that, well, go ahead. But right now we're thinking about, it's a very literal behavior, and it can involve some element of skill. Do you have any questions or comments?
15 seconds, so official time is ticking.
Very good.
Okay.
All right, so
Yes.
I'm going to be talking about different types of artist presentations and visiting artist lectures. Throughout the years, we've done a lot of different. I had to go to a lot of different visiting artist speeches, so that it would be something that I would do frequently. Every Tuesday, we would have a different visiting artist, and there would be a big, nice room where everyone, probably about 150 people or so total, would all go into this room and watch this artist lecture. And I went and I started getting used to the formats of artist lectures, and every single person would have one slide and then give their artist lecture, and then usually it would be chronological. They would start with the beginning. This is what I did when I was an undergrad or whatever, or then I started making videos of me walking on Jell-O or something like that. And
Yes.
that was that phase. But usually people didn't really play with the medium itself, which I always found kind of interesting, because behind where they're speaking is a huge like a movie-sized screen. So there's a modern projector in the
Yes.
something like the Grand Theater, and there's a screen like that big as the Grand Theater screen, and all these artists always come in, and they never actually do anything with that space other than make a PowerPoint presentation,
Yes.
and it's still the slide format.
Yes.
So I started compiling all of my videos together, and this is like an ongoing project of videos upon videos upon videos. So this video has been transformed into other videos since, and so anytime I speak about something, I can always like put this video into something else. And if it's a 30-minute presentation, for instance, I could make a 30-minute long video, and I could actually at least use this space for some visual excitement rather than PowerPoint flipping through the slides. So, in this video currently, we can see a lot of different images. Here's my blog up here where I'm collecting a lot of different like source material, and for me, like, source material is a big part of my process in painting. Collecting images is part of how I create stuff, and a lot of times I'm looking for images. Like I've told you before, I was looking for those books, which were like old computer books, outdated computer books with like secretaries and stuff like this. So I'm oftentimes looking for that type of content itself. But also, like, having a lot of different images is important, because back in the day when you were making drawings or paintings, we have to think that sketchbooks were just a place to hold images from the world that you would bring back to a studio. So you would go out into the world and you would create sketches of stuff. Like Leonardo da Vinci would have his little brown pen, and he would go down by the river or whatever, and he would draw water for the day and study water. That's why they were originally called studies, because you were just studying, how does the water work when it goes down the stream? How many pokies does that bird have on the back of its head? Of course, now with telephones in our pockets, we can just walk around easily and take pictures of whatever we want to, and it's seemingly immediately accessible, but it isn't totally immediately accessible, because it's on your phone, it's accessible, but it's also very small on your phone. So in a lot of ways, these types of studies that are done on bigger pieces of paper are actually still better than a stupid little picture on your phone. And oftentimes I'll see my students, they're just constantly working on off of their phones, and they're like, this big is the image. And it's like, go print out your image. You need a bigger image in order to work from that image. So I'm constantly like saving a lot of different source material. There's actually a section in Crumb, the documentary about R. Crumb, where Crumb is going through his book of just source material. And he talks about how he didn't drive a car, but he had a friend of his just take him out and drive him around town to take pictures of trash cans and street lamps and electrical lines. And his line in the movie exactly was like, you can't make this stuff up. And you have to kind of think about that from an old school illustrator's perspective. A lot of times we think there's this weird magic that occurs where it's like, R. Crumb knows exactly what an electrical line looks like. He can just draw it out of his head. But there's an entire process that goes into like creating those source images, putting them together, and then drawing from them whenever is needed. So in this series of videos, or in this series of paintings here, you can see like I'm working a lot with like patterns intersecting with these other types of forms that are exploding into little bits and pieces. These was a series of dream paintings I did. And there's a little dune buggy down there. This is one of my first paintings where I started like combing, using a comb as a tool, just to make scratches in the paint and scratching into the paint. In this painting, I put a paint on a pendulum in a container that like leaked it out. So the pendulum would like circle around and splatter in different ways. Here's the Techno-Viking painting, which was part of a case in Germany involving this guy who was called the Techno-Viking, who saved this person who was being harassed at the Fuck Parade in Berlin. And he later sued, I don't know who he sued somebody for copyright infringement, and basically they ruled that it's against the law for you to profit off somebody else's likeness for material purposes. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can take a picture of somebody if they're in public. That's still legal, but it's against the law to take their picture and then put it on a t-shirt and make money from that. So the Techno-Viking was one of those instances where somebody became so famous on the internet that their internet fame, which was not asked for, they didn't ask to become a viral internet sensation, was monetized, and all of a sudden Techno-Vikings on t-shirts, Techno-Vikings on coffee mugs, and all this sort of stuff, and Techno-Viking sees none of the money. But then we have to think, is Techno-Viking Techno-Viking? Is he Techno-Viking, or is he just an imaginary creation of the internet?
Yes.
Right? So who really names Techno-Viking Techno-Viking? It's kind of not him as a person in my mind.
Yes.
It's a character that the internet creates based on him. And when he talked about it, he said he was on speed for like 3 days and he hadn't slept. And so he didn't like how he was acting. But he kind of saves the day. That's why everyone liked him on the internet, because this girl's kind of being annoyed by this guy. And then this big guy with his shirt off and a long beard comes up and like tells the guy to screw off, basically. So here I was looking at different early German landscapes that were like pre-Renaissance landscapes. I like those a lot because I think that they're like video game landscapes a lot of the time, because they're completely imaginary. So they're within landscape painting. There's like the Romantics. There's people like Audubon. Audubon's known for like looking at a bird and painting like feathers properly. Like he's actually just painting all these different feathers. But then there's also people that were just making stuff up. And so you could look at a lot of those pre-Renaissance German landscapes paintings, and you could find these different configurations that are just made up out of somebody's mind. But that made up world is actually kind of surrealistic, and so surrealism had a thing with these same exact paintings. So when you look at Salvador Dali's big vacant landscapes, right, they're like a empty landscape. They're kind of like a video game now. I mean, I think that's the closest comparison we could make now in this day and age. A vast landscape that kind of never ends. And like with Inca's games that she's playing, like when I was playing video games, it was Super Mario, and there was 8 levels, and there was four levels on each bigger level, I guess. So each level had 4 different things you had to get through. 4 like quests. So Super Mario Brothers had 32 possible levels, and once you finished, that was the end of the game. There was no more Super Mario Brothers. And nowadays, with these kids and their tablets, their games never end. Their games are actually universes, their games are actually places, which is kind of where I think we're headed, where the next step will be that place itself becomes destabilized through like augmented reality and these sort of things, where we're looking at the world through a pair of glasses that changes the world which we're looking at. So that's kind of like the final stage that we're headed to. Here's a little snippet from the Horizons project.
Wow.
That I was awarded from Cinema 100 in North Dakota to create for an emerging film grant there. And I did a series of videos of the Horizon, and I started lacing them together, kind of like Agnes Martin almost in a way, where I'm abstracting the landscape itself. So looking at place in that sort of way, I think, we have so many videos now of beautiful places, especially when people put like GoPros on their head and this sort of stuff. So we have endless amounts of like B-roll of all the real world, but then when we go out into the real world, people want to change it somehow. In this video, we see some different DNA snapshots. There was an artist that created images based upon DNA. So you can look at DNA and it says like this person has a big nose, or this person has like really big hands, but it's kind of interesting that there's like no gene actually for race. So there's no, this is a black person. In DNA, you actually can't see that.
Really?
So that artist was kind of playing with that facial recognition the software that did that sort of stuff. Here you can see a painting machine that I'm using, where I broke apart a bunch of little brushes and then put them onto this bobble ball, which is like a children's toy where you turn it on and then it's kind of like fumbles around all over the place, and then I use that to like create my paintings themselves. And that's all part of this like mechanized view of creating paintings. So I wanted to like give away a little bit of my personal autonomy in creation over to other mechanized machines to kind of show this mechanization of ourselves, which is also occurring at the same time. This is from this kind of like squiggles that you can see coming in here now are from a video synthesizer, and we had one in the basement at CU Boulder. And it's kind of interesting to think that there's an analog way of still moving the pixels on a television, which is totally abstract. So thinking about this square as also being a possibility for like an abstract painting, which we usually don't think of. Usually we use TV to watch Rachel Maddow or 90 Day Fiancé or something like that.
Yes.
But we could imagine a world where abstract paintings would just exist on TVs, and then people could just sit down on a chair and just watch pixels at night, and then eat dinner and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
So we can end by just looking at these pixels in silence for a little bit and we'll be done.
Very good. Once you shut the light off.
And that's it.